In my previous video, we just finished a 30 days experiment and we exposed someone to AI as a personal assistant. And we measured something very specific, their thinking, their beliefs, their decisions, the deviation from the core beliefs. And what we found goes completely against what most people are saying. AI did not reduce critical thinking, it increased it. And even more surprising, it changed how they see themselves and the world around them. Now, here's the real question. If AI changes how humans think, what does that do to the economy? I'm Ilya Lamin, and here we explore the AI economy, not through hype, not through fear, but through what is actually changing. And today I want to take this experiment one step further. Not just what AI does to individuals, but what happens when millions of people start thinking differently, more aware, more effective, less dependent on other people's opinion. Because when thinking changes, behavior changes. And when behavior changes, well, the entire economy changes also. So for those of you who are new here, let's go back to what happened during that 30-day experiment. Let me put myself aside here. You're gonna see it more. So what we did, we ran an experiment it was a 30-day experiment when we took an individual that was exposed to a AI assistant. He needed to interact with an AI assistant verbally, not through prompts, not by typing on the just not by typing basically a bunch of prompts to get an instruction from AI, but just through an interaction with an AI. And basically the individual will have to share everything about him, basically his challenges, his problems, and everything that goes with an AI. And we at the end of each day, we measure two things. We measure the level of critical thinking, and we measure the what we call the deviation from his core beliefs. His core beliefs is basically what he believes about himself and about the external environment, about the world around him. So those two things that we measure at the end of each day. And we run that experiment for 30 days. For 30 days, the guy, actually, what you see on the picture, it's not the guy that was in the experiment. Actually, I cannot show it for confidentiality. It's just a depiction that you see. But just to give you an idea that it was through an app, and he had to interact with an AI for 30 days, basically sharing all his daily challenges, problems, situations with AI. And AI will act was acting as basically as a consultant, as a personal consultant that were active 24 hours 7 days a week. And through that interaction, we wanted to measure the how the individual thinking is evolving, basically. So what we found out, and yeah, it's a little bit, it's small on your screen, but let me just put myself out of here and increase it. There we go. Basically, what you see here is the results. We have the blue line, which represents the critical thinking, and we have the orange line, which represents the deviation from the core beliefs. Our assumption was that when an individual is exposed to information synthesized like an AI, which kind of thinks for it's himself, when the individual delegate a lot of the decision making, not all the decision, but his thinking to a system, there should be an atrophy in terms of his thinking, in terms of the function of his brain. Basically, the brain will atrophy, so you'll have less thinking. The individual will think less, basically, and the core beliefs will not change, because why would they change? So what happens is actually the contrary of what we believe. you see that his coefficient of critical thinking is about around 1.5 at the time of measurement, and it didn't fluctuate until a week later when we saw that actually his critical thinking started to increase quite significantly. And also the core beliefs it's the line in orange, didn't change that much. I mean, there's some bumps, but it stayed the same for 2 weeks. And after that, we saw some changes, and we saw that the deviation if in his core beliefs, that this means that the person, his beliefs about himself and about the world around him is changing. And this means that that individual get more and more awareness about what's really going on, because you cannot just change unless he's indoctrinated in some, but usually it doesn't happen. It happens when individuals get more and more awareness. He start to question things. He start to question himself, but also question the environment around him. So that's really interesting as finding that we found when we did the 30 days experiment. That said, we also kind of trying to understand, okay, well, if the critical thinking of individual increases, what actually that represents for the economy, what the AI economy will look like when people are become much more critical, when their beliefs changes. Because at this point, we're not, there's most of us, including even myself, do not interact on constantly with an AI assistant, having a verbal conversation like almost every 2-3 hours. That is just, or even every 5 to 10 minutes. That just doesn't exist. We use it to prompt because at this point the AI tools are quite limited. They have limited capabilities, and you have to prompt it. Because in that experiment, we force the individual to adapt that behavior. But usually at this point, the AI tools are quite limited, and they don't just run in the background. You have to prompt them. You have to give them some instructions. And so that said, what will eventually happen when AI will become like an assistant, like running in the background, constantly interacting with you, constantly being, even verbally, you don't have to put any instruction, you don't have prompted, it's just, constant interaction with you. So we wanted to know what happens. And we also came to some assumptions. And a lot of what I will tell you right away, right now, are most of it are speculations. But there are speculations with a higher degree of probability. So it's not like we are speculating, we're just fantasizing. It's based on reality of how things evolve, how technology evolves, and how humans evolve within our civilization when it comes to general purpose technologies like AI that will be implemented and will be integrated in our society. So when you have, we took as an assumption, when you have like more awareness, more effectiveness, and less, we probably will have a less reliance on others' opinion. So the first thing that we assume is we'll have a decline of opinion-based authority. You see, today a lot of value comes from experts, influencers, institutions, people who know. They know something, whatever it's from their experience or whatever from their own learning, they know something. Now, and people rely on them because they usually don't have time, don't have tools, or they don't have the level of clarity that they wanted to have. But if individuals can think better with AI, they rely less on consultants, influencers, even traditional experts. Now, what we could have is that the impact on the economy is that the authority shifts from who you are, so to speak, to how good your reasoning is, basically. That's a big shift. That's a big shift because it's not only relies on how you label yourself, but more, okay, what exact value could you bring to us? And that's a shift. That's a shift because it's very different from what we experiencing today. And I know a couple of you, and I received those things in the comment. I think I received 2 comments of people who saying, "Oh my gosh, you giving that's really interesting what you're communicating in the because I'm going a little bit more deeper than usual the so-called expert. I'm not considering myself an expert. I'm a professional in what I'm doing, but this so-called expert that you see on some convention, on every convention, that they will tag, and now at the end you ask yourself that question. Well, actually, what exactly what was it all about? You hear nice phrases, good terms. You see the individual, he's well dressed, with some charisma, with some energy, but then you ask yourself what exactly he was talking about. Like, what the hell? Well, that's the issue. I mean, it's relies more on the reputation that on the real value that individual brings. And I received a couple of comments about those type of individuals. They say, "Oh my gosh, Ilya, you're really going deep, and you open up our eyes." It's very different from what we hear on a bunch of AI conventions. Well, I mean, and probably that will change also. The second point is the rise of independent decision makers. You see, if people think more clearly, if they question more, if they analyze faster, then they become more autonomous economic agents. Because obviously AI will augment them. You will have a thinking partner, basically. And obviously they would choose better to switch faster to something that gives them more value. They will adapt faster. They will not be stuck within their some individual will be stuck in their behavior, but it will become less and less the case. And what will be the economic impact of that? Well, the market will become less influenced by branding alone, more influenced by actual value. What value do some companies or individuals bring? And this could reduce a lot what we see, the manipulation, the blind loyalty to brands. That's something that could change pretty fast. The third point is the pressure on middle layers of the economy. What do I mean by that? There's a whole layer of the economy that exists to interpret information, simplify decisions, guide choices. I could give you an example, like all those consultants firms, analysts, advisors, certain type of even managers. If individuals can do more of that themselves with AI, this middle interpretation layer gets compressed, basically. Not eliminated completely, because you cannot eliminate it completely, but reduced significantly. The fourth point is gonna be the trust becomes more personal, less institutional. You see, that doesn't mean trust disappears, because people will say, well, if AI will fake everything and will synthesize everything and everything will become synthetic, that means we don't know what to trust, the trust will disappear. No, that's not going to be the case. It just shifts from institutions, brands, authority figures to more like a personal judgment things, small trust circles, and probably direct experiences. And the impact of that will be, we may see more like a fragmentation of influence, whether for companies or individuals, decline of mass authority, and rise of kind of a bunch of niche trust networks when everyone trusts everyone, but it's kind of small, it's niche, and it's specific to a certain groups basically. Then the fifth point is the faster belief update, basically faster economic shifts. If people change beliefs faster, they change behavior faster, they change spending faster, they also change career faster, and that will give us like an economy that will be more fluid, less predictable, but also more adaptive, at least for on a certain level. Trends may rise and fall much faster that we have them today, basically. Now, the sixth point I have is that new competitive advantage is will have more clarity. If everyone has access to AI, then what differentiates people is basically how they use it. You see, the advantage goes to people who can ask better questions, interpret output correctly, make decisions. Because AI, it's an information synthesizer. It gives you knowledge. It gives you additional thinking, additional augmentation. It's augmenting your cognitive capability on a certain level, but you still have to, need to have some agency. You need to make decisions. You need to judge whatever you receive makes sense or not. So the scarce resource will become clarity of thinking. I think that will become the scarcest resource at this point. And the second point that I wanted to make is that, you see, before AI, people rely on others to think for them. After AI, people start thinking for themselves, but with amplified intelligence. And that's powerful by itself. We don't know what will be the results of all of this. At this point, we just could speculate. But if what we observe is true, then AI does not just automate work; it decentralizes. It's decentralizing the individual thinking on an individual level, basically. And when thinking is decentralized, usually power becomes more distributed, decisions become more individual, and systems become less centralized. That's exactly what happened with internet, but now it happened to the cognitive level, not just information. It happened on the level on which we think, basically. And so you see, there's a very interesting tension. If people become more independent thinker, do they become more aligned with reality or more fragmented in their own perspective? And that's something that I don't have an answer for that. Probably we're gonna eventually see if that is the case, and maybe we'll have a mix of both of this. Anyway, that's all what I wanted to communicate to basically translate to communicate with you these days. And if you have any question, any comments, please leave them in the comment section, and I will see you in the next one.